My very first encounter with Adlerian psychology was when I was a school counselor in a small high school in Nebraska. And I saw a brochure to go see Rudolf Dreikler's work with a group of adolescents. And I did not know what he was doing. I did not understand him. When it happened in the presentation, I got up and left. And a year later, I was a graduate student at the University of Wyoming, and I met a man by the name of Bill Edwards, and he read from this book, a purple book, called The Individual Psychology of Alfred Adler. And I couldn't understand what he was reading. I understood his style of relating to people. And I remember one day I had left my books clear across campus in another classroom building. And I walked into class and I said something I shouldn't have said. And I said, I left my books on the other side of the campus. And he put his hand in his pocket and he threw me his car keys. And said, you go. You know how to drive a Volkswagen? I said, yes, I do. And I went across campus and got my books, drove his car around campus. He practiced social interest. He practiced community feeling, Gemeinschaftsgefühl. He also showed us and explained to us tapes of Rudolf Dreikler's counseling parents and children, and I began to understand Dreikler's. And then I went to the University of Wyoming again to become a full-time graduate student, and a group of us drove about 2.5 hours to see Oscar Christensen speak. And I saw Oscar Christensen speak, and he was working with family constellation, and I said, I want to do what he's doing. I want to understand what he does and how he does it. 35 years later, Oscar Christensen and I were the co-presenters at a conference in Canada. I was able to achieve my dream. That's when I started. And I started with understanding and working with families, or trying to understand families. From there, I returned to Nebraska, where I now reside, and a friend of mine, I was working in a mental health center, and a friend of mine came into my office and he said, look at this book I've been reading. It's called Children the Challenge by Rudolf Dreikler. And I said, oh yes, I know that book. I know how he thinks. I know what that's about. And he said, this is wonderful. So we began to study together Adlerian psychology. And I went to some training in the summer at the University of Vermont, studied there 2 weeks, studied family counseling and lifestyle analysis. And then in Nebraska, there was a small study group formed, and I joined that study group and went through their certificate training program. The Nebraska Society of Adlerian Psychology is now defunct, but I received training from them. I came across a parent education program called Systematic Training for Effective Parenting by Don Dinkmeyer and Gary McKay. And I saw the kit, and I loved it. And I began to run parent study groups. And I ran 100 parent study groups in northeast Nebraska where I live. And then I began to work with teachers. And I then began to go to Adlerian conferences. In 1993, I went to the first North American Society of Adlerian Psychology conference, and I was hooked. And I have been to every one since. And I began to learn more and more about Adlerian psychology. And in 2004 or 5, I went to ACASI, the International Congress of Adlerian Summer Schools and Institutes in Ireland. and got my first deep exposure to Adlerian psychology. I learned a great deal there about myself and about how to work with others, and then I went home and began studying and studying and studying and studying. That's my many things about Adler's personality. He was the second of 7 children. We sometimes read in the literature he was the second of 6. He was the second of 7. He has a brother who was kind of a tag-along in the family. Adler believed very much from early on, from what I can read, very much in equality. He wanted to, he thought he should be welcome and was welcome in virtually every home in his neighborhood. He was out and about. He was a social guy. And he played with people and interacted with people, whomever they might be. He also liked the arts. He liked music. He liked to sing. And he also, I read that he was an actor, that he liked acting. I just read that recently. Yeah, so, and he was always concerned, I think, about the conditions of others. I think early on he wanted to defy death. He also was a fighter. He fought with words. And his relationship with Freud, they were not kind to each other throughout their lives. So there's another side of that we don't talk about very much. There's a couple of people that have reported that Adler could either be fiery, a little bit fiery occasionally, but very rarely. I would describe him as a kind man, as a man who probably didn't get all the privacy that he needed or wanted to think. He was a man who was very much a common man. He was, if he were today, he would take public transportation. He would not be someone who would consider himself to be better or worse than anyone else. I have done some research on the letters that he wrote to his daughters. And I specifically done work on the 3 letters he wrote to his daughter, his oldest daughter, Valentine. And I think this is a wonderful testament to the kind of man that Adler was. Imperfect? No. Or perfect? No. Imperfect? Yes. And he wrote 3 letters to his daughter Valentine. One when she was an adolescent, one when she graduated from school, and one to she and her husband when they were to be married. And as I read those letters, I can see and hear Adlerian theory coming from the letters. So I think he was a man who tried very hard to practice what he preached. He also talked a great deal. I don't know if he talked a great deal, but Rollo May indicates that Adler spoke in his speeches about the courage to be imperfect. That Adler would talk about that when Rollo May remembers that. He writes that in one of his books, I think it's in Creative Living. And Adler talks about developing the courage to be imperfect. So my hunch is that Adler probably wanted to be perfect and probably struggled with not being there. Okay, sure. The smoker, he smoked cigarettes, he smoked cigars, he smoked pipe. He would not smoke today. He was a physician. He recognized the mind-body connection. He was also a little overweight later in his life. As I see pictures of him, he was always chunky, but then he got a little tummy later in his life. I want to return to the letters he wrote to his daughter. I think that adds to the idea of Adler searching for, striving for, and his translators use about 15 or 16 different words. Striving for security, for completion, for fulfillment, for significance. I think Adler was searching for completion. by writing those letters to his daughter. And the interesting piece is that she died the same year that he died. And I don't have the dates of which, I know she died in, I think, I'm not sure when she died, I don't have that. Yeah. Heinz and Rowena were both small people. Small, they were not tall. They were maybe, I don't know, I can't. They were smaller than Adler. Adler was about 5'8", and I don't know how that would translate into centimeters. But Heinz and Rowena Ansbacher were introduced to each other by Adler. He introduced them to one another. Heinz was a scholar. He was scholarly. So was Rowena. Rowena was the one, Heinz said, Rowena was the one who kept me in place. She made sure that everything was done exactly right. Yes. Very good people. They were not practitioners. They were theoreticians. I think if one wants to understand the Ansbachers and understand Adler, I've not done this in a discipline sequence. I would take a look at the 3 books that the Ansbachers have edited of Adler's, Cooperation Between the Sexes, Social Superiority and Social Interest, and The Individual Psychology of Alfred Adler. I would read the Ansbacher's comments. I like their comments. I think they have a really, really good feel for Adler's theory. They raised 4 sons. And their sons have been successful in music, I believe as an engineer, in a wide variety of things. That speaks to their nurturing, their values of education. I can remember Rowena's smile. I was only around her one afternoon, a very pleasant smile. And Heinz, I can't remember whether I ever shook his hand or not. I can't remember that. But I have an Adler story about that. I would go to conferences and I would walk down the hall and I would see Kurt Adler, Alfred Adler's son, and I would nod my head and he would nod his head in return. And I would never talk to him. I thought I was not worthy or shy or whatever kind of thing, private logic I had running around in my brain. So I went to one of my friends and I said, his name was Bob Barthel, and I said, Bob, do you know Kurt Adler? And he said, oh yes, I know him. I said, what kind of guy is he? He's a very nice man. He's friendly, he's cordial. He will talk to you about theory, but he will not talk with you about his personal life. And I said, oh, I can understand that. And he said he would be delighted if you would just come and introduce yourself and say, I'm very pleased to meet you, and I would like to just shake your hand and be in your presence and congratulate you for your work. So I decided I was going to do that. In that year, he died. I never got to do that. So what I tell people that I work with, if there's an Adlerian that you know, or I've heard of, or I've read about, and you have a chance to visit with him, please, or her, please approach them. So please approach him or her and say, hello, I am a student of Adler like you. And I have practiced that. That's been a good thing. The Ansbachers, Rowena had Alzheimer's. She had Alzheimer's disease. And Heinz would go visit her every day and take care of her in the nursing home as much as he could. And she, in her paintings, in the art therapy she was doing in the nursing home, she drew a picture, at least one, of people helping each other. I remember that story. It's a wonderful story.
Yes, wonderful.
I think that they attempted to practice the ideas, not the theory, and I think they have tried to practice it not as psychologists, but as people in their daily lives. I think they treated each other with equality and respect and a high regard for each other. Theory. No theory. No ethics. No strategy. Strategies, interventions. Maintain a relationship with a supervisor as long as you are working. I believe that people need to identify a theory that they can identify with and use as a foundation for understanding people. I think a beginning counselor or psychotherapist needs to begin to understand how people move through life. I think a beginning counselor needs to understand people from birth to death, across the lifespan. I believe that a counselor or psychotherapist needs to maintain good mental health, and when the individual doubts his or her mental health, that they seek help for those mental health problems. I think you can take your clients, work with your clients only as far as you have been in your life, not in regard to age, but if you have problems of a certain nature, that will probably block some of the movement of your clients. In regard to ethics, they have a code of ethics that you follow, and you need to have someone to talk to if you run into an ethical dilemma. I believe you need to have continuing education to learn what's going on in the field. I also believe that you need to there's three things. You need to develop your talents or your intelligence. You need to develop creativity and decision-making powers, and you need to be involved in the community some way or another. I also believe a beginning psychotherapist needs to look at his or her contributions to needs to see people individually, to facilitate a group, and to teach a class. All three of those things, if possible. And I speak only from a position of Adlerian psychology. That's the only psychology that I've known and practiced since 1975. I call myself an Adlerian since 1975, or 72 actually. With others, we've had to find someone to talk to about, find a mentor if you can, someone. I am a believer in education and educate. I think the school, I think we get some education from life. I think we need to have also theory. I did not always believe that, but I'm very strong believer in the necessity for theory for a beginning counselor. Survey the theories. Pick an imperfect theory for you. Every theory has problems. Everyone. Pick one that seems to fit. Learn it, study with the masters. A question that I have in the selection of theory is, will that theory be around in 100 years or 150 years? Adlerian psychology, for me, has surpassed that test. It's been alive for 100 years and will still be around 100 years from now. That's my thinking. I don't think other theories will survive, will pass that test. I think that they will fall off. I also think that we also need to, if we're going to, a beginning counselor psychotherapist probably needs some work, and I didn't have this work, I'm only learning it now in my studies, is the history and systems of psychology. I like Henry Ellenberger's book. It's very thick.